So fast forwarding, LeBron also gave his thoughts on basketball players' IQ and why some of your favorite stars don't actually elevate to a whole nother level. And we've seen this play out through the numerous years where we see guys like Carmelo Anthony not reach above a certain level, and we keep asking, the talent's there, he has the size advantage, why is it not translating to him getting consistent deep playoff runs? We've seen a young Paul George in 2013 eliminate Melo in the second round, and we also seen Melo along with Russell Westbrook, another NBA quote-unquote superstar that struggles with playoff success post Kevin Durant, as him and Melo were eliminated by a young rookie in Donovan Mitchell in the Utah Jazz in the playoffs. None of that added up. These guys were superstars, years marketed into the league, just making all-star appearance, winning individual awards, scoring titles, but yet they could not eliminate a young rookie in Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs. That's because the basketball IQ isn't there. And it's the same reason why Westbrook had lost to Damian Lillard in the playoffs while having Paul George and Carmelo Anthony in a much better bench unit in that OKC Thunder roster. So right here, you're definitely seeing why your favorite stars throughout the league don't actually elevate up to a different level. The higher up you go, there's a separation, and basketball IQ tends to be one of those. And another example I can give you is Amari Stoudemire. It's not until he played for the Knicks is when he started saying this is the first time in his career he's actually playing defense. And we've seen the results of that in Phoenix, because when he was out for the whole season in 2005 and 2006, the Suns actually had one of their most efficient seasons, which they finished with a 61 win and 21 loss season, which matched up to their initial Steve Nash inaugurational season, where they caught the whole league by storm with their fast-paced style of play. So even though Amari Stoudemire was out for the whole 2005-2006 season, they were still able to match that regular season success without him. And that's because with Stoudemire at the time, all the points, dunks, rebounds, all those stats that he was putting up almost equated to the amount of points that he gave up on the other end. So it's almost like his 25 plus points per game was nullified by the opponents because the amount of defense or the lack of defense that he was playing on the other end. But there's other players I could put in the same category as far as stars lacking basketball IQ, but I wouldn't necessarily at the same time put them on this list. Guys like Trae Young, Damian Lillard, John Wall, Gilbert Arenas, and James Harden. I wouldn't say they lack the basketball IQ, but they are lacking, let's say, heart in the playoffs. They're lacking the heart to come back, or they're lacking the defensive tenacity. The higher up you go, especially when you're the last 4 to 6 teams in the NBA playoffs, your two-way game got to come in at some point. So I wouldn't necessarily say these guys are lacking basketball IQ, especially guys like James Harden, very smart player, but they tend to lack heart or either the defensive tenacity for me to put them on this list. But definitely on this list in modern times, I'll put Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, and Amari Stoudemire for sure.
Basketball IQ. I have described Nikola Jokic, I've described you as having supercomputers. Like your processing speed is a little different. I put James Harden in that category. I put Luka in that category. Yeah. There's a number of guys that have like a different processing speed. Some of this stuff, love of the game, that's a little bit of just desire, attitude, all that stuff. Competitive stamina, same thing. Can you develop basketball IQ at the highest level? You can get a little smarter as a player. Can you develop it as at the highest level?
When you brought up basketball IQ, the first thing that came to my mind, I started thinking right away. I was like, are you born with basketball IQ, or are you taught the game the right way and now the basketball IQ clicks on?
Now this is where the players upcoming in the NBA draft kind of get caught in this Venus flytrap. When they first come into the NBA, sometimes they may get drafted into a team where they have bad culture and they just allow the star players to get the keys to the Ferrari off a rip and just drive the franchise into a place of no man's land. And we've seen this play out with the Houston Rockets, the way they gave Jalen Green the keys to do whatever he wants. He sort of brought that AAU play style to the Houston Rockets, which led him nowhere for 2 years. And we've seen players like Carmelo Anthony, instead of getting drafted to the Detroit Pistons, which would have helped him in his career because they would have locked him down into a system, especially with Larry Brown and the veteran players they had on that team like Rasheed Wallace, Chauncey Billups, and Rip Hamilton. They would have had him adopt a higher level of discipline when it comes to his approach to the game, which would have possibly led to Melo being more of a defensive player, which would have added on to his list of skill sets besides scoring. But instead, he went to the Nuggets, where they gave him the keys to the franchise off rip. He got his first coach fired, and eventually he bumps heads with George Karl as that coach tried to lock him down into being a more of a two-way player and bringing his game up to a level where it could benefit the whole team, not just him. But Melo, like many young draftees when they first come into the league, the culture that they get indoctrinated in, it's really hard to break the longer that they get more seasoned. It's almost like a child that was raised at a young age and just never got disciplined. And now all of a sudden at age 7, you want to apply some sort of discipline. It's just really going to be hard to break.
There's guys in the NBA that if you call a play or a coach draw a play to one side of the floor, they can't switch it in their head and do it and say, let's run it to the other side without the coach drawing on the clipboard.
Yeah.
I've never understood that. And I don't know. I never understood that. So if I say we running thumb down angle, we're running on the right side. So because I have a left-hand point guard, he wants to come middle to a strong hand. He has the ability to hit the pocket pass with the left hand, has the ability to throw ahead, he's lefty, and also has the ability to throw back on the shake. But if I say, hey, we run a thumb down angle on the left side because now the right-hand guard coming right, I've had teammates that's like, oh, what do you mean? Coaches always, in practice, we only ran it from this side.
Yeah.
I could flip a play when I was 8 years old. No matter if it was just pass and cut, no matter if it was, let's run flex, but let's start on the left side. No matter if it was just, let's DHO, driving kick. The last one, all right, now let's just drive the baseline drive drift. If the forward on the left side is looking at the ball, you can slot cut. I could do that. I was doing that stuff when I was like 8, 9 years old. And
once again, LeBron James is a basketball prodigy. I believe he's the first prodigy to enter into the league. Just completely built to be in the league, not just physically, but just mentally. He has it. He has the smarts. He has the adaptability. This guy has all the fucking necessary tools to just be a GOAT off rip. His success really evolves around small tweakings here and there and just plugging him into the right environment. It's almost like an automatic trip to the NBA Finals.
And my coaches would just be blown away, and I wouldn't know where it came from. I have no idea. So to get back to your question, I think I was born with a sports IQ, and it could have been any sport, but I just think basketball was the one that I chose, and maybe I was chosen to do that as well. Yeah. And I just took it to a whole, as I got older and your mind you start to live it, you start to want to be a part of it, you start watching. I started watching the games, when I was like 9, 10 years old. When I first started, I was watching just a fan. I was just a fan of Michael Jordan and Anthony Penny Hardaway and Grant Hill and, those guys. I was just a fan. But then when I started playing the game, I actually started like studying what those guys were doing out on the floor and what teams were doing, how teams were guarding, how coaches were coaching, subbing patterns, time of possession.
Once again, LeBron right here showing that he's been a prodigy since day one. The only thing that needed to come in when he was 9 years old was the physical tools. And by the time he started going to high school, the physical tools just came in and the whole package just came together. And when I say LeBron James is one of the first NBA prodigies that we've seen, very similar to maybe a child that's a musical prodigy. Maybe he could play the piano or the cello a certain way. LeBron is like that for the NBA. And it doesn't mean that he's the GOAT off rip. It just means that he's born with the necessary tools, just a gift. He's quote unquote the gifted off rip. You can just see it. It just needs to be tailored. And once he's in the right environment, he's going to strive off rip. And when you compare him to the other GOATs of the league, guys like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, the storyline plays out for these guys very different. They didn't come into the league with the same raw tools that LeBron did. He wasn't really physically imposing at the age of 18. And also he had to develop his game with the quote unquote Mamba mentality. Every day you go in, you put in the work, and day by day you get past your competition. You see Allen Iverson being the first pick of that 96 draft. He was better than Kobe off rip. He had the more raw tools at the young age of 18, 19, 20, Kobe Bryant out of high school didn't really have necessarily those raw tools, but he had the mentality. So day in, day out, when Allen Iverson was in the club or just at the casinos or just partying the night before games, Kobe was in the gym working on his game. He could have been working on post-up moves for a whole summer. Then he could be working just on his footwork for a whole nother month. Kobe was that type of player. We seen Phil Jackson criticize him one offseason, mentioning his lack of post moves. Then he came back after that offseason, just posting guys up for the first 2 months of the season. Kobe was that persistent, and that same persistence over the years eventually had him performing and being a lot better player than Allen Iverson. And then if we look at guys like Michael Jordan, they came into the league, they had all the physical tools, but the basketball IQ wasn't as high until Phil Jackson took Michael Jordan's game, maybe knocked him down a few pegs of averaging maybe 5 to 6 points less per game, and trusting his teammates more and indoctrinating his game into the system, into the triangle system. That's when we see Michael Jordan had more success. Once again, I'm not saying LeBron is the GOAT off rip when he first came into the league, but understand he was a prodigy off rip. The basketball IQ was there, along with him being 18 years old, 6'8", and about 260 pounds. This guy was almost as big as some of the power forwards in the league, but at the same time, he was running just as fast as Allen Iverson, and at the same time, he had a young basketball mind that adapted fast as fuck. That's what I mean when I say he is one of the first true prodigies to enter into the NBA.
Haynes, Dick Wall, my early coaches for the Roanoke Jaguars.
Yep.
They taught me how to play. They taught me how to play with toughness. I get to JV, 8th grade, Chris Morris,
Yep.
Billy Hicks. Then I go to Coach K at Duke.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to the NBA, I knew how to process and think the game. It wasn't new to me. It wasn't new to me to think the game.
You also knew what was bullshit and what was not bullshit.
Yes.
There's a lot of bullshit that gets taught in our league because our league has been feast off potential.
And LeBron couldn't say this any better. The league is definitely a feast off potential. That's why you see the NBA media at large praise guys like Tyrese Halliburton and Ben Simmons before his little meltdown against the Hawks. But yet you see them perplexed when they see guys like Jimmy Butler get to the NBA Finals 2 out of the last 3 years. And also guys like Jalen Brunson. The NBA media is very confused on how to just overall evaluate this guy because they don't see the potential in the athleticism. And that's where a lot of the NBA scouts kind of get stuck at, is looking at the athleticism, a lot of the tangibles that the player brings to the game, but they don't really look at the intangibles. That's how they got caught slipping with Ben Simmons, because in reality, the 76ers, when they had lost to the Toronto Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals, they should have stuck with Jimmy Butler and traded Ben Simmons. But yet the potential they saw in Ben Simmons because of his athleticism had the media sold, which in reality, that was the bullshit.
Guys with potential, they come in and say, this guy has potential. We have to, if it's not year 1, maybe year 2, or not year
3, not year 4, not year 5, aka Zion Williams. When is he gonna pop? They still talk about him as if he's some sort of star that's gonna lead a team. But yet 5 years in, we haven't seen any of this potential come true. It's just now starting to come to light with the Pelicans recently getting hot, but the expectations are really a lot lower than where they should be. As this season, it's rumored that he lost 25 pounds, but in reality, he should have lost 25 pounds 4 years ago.
3 or maybe year 4, or we're gonna pick up his option in year 4. Like, it's been grasped on potential. Like, that has been.
Once again, it couldn't play out any better than Zion Williams. He got a max rookie scale contract extension, even though he was virtually absent for the first 4 years of his career.
The whole thing of the lottery. The whole thing of the lottery, pick 1 through 13 or 14, I don't even know what it is now when it cuts off like you've been a lottery pick. But it makes sense why those guys that's like 16 to 30, 16 to 42, why those guys be on real contending teams making impacts.
Also, why is it the same teams that always draft well?
And why is it always the same teams that pick top 7, but yet they always end up being in the same scenario the following season?
Teams that always draft poorly.
I'll tell you when I get my team, the teams that draft well, those guys will be working for me for sure.
LeBron speaking about being an NBA owner as if the deal is already done, set, and sealed. It wouldn't shock me if LeBron ends up retiring at age 43 as the league transitions and tries to find a new figurehead or just cultivate the next person to be that figurehead. Sometimes it takes a couple of years to prep that person up. But LeBron staying a few extra years, it's almost playing out the same way Michael Jordan had made his comeback, because the league was struggling with ratings. As Michael Jordan made his exit from the league, when LeBron James was already on his way in, thus ushering a new figurehead of the league, especially when Kobe Bryant was going through his trial in Colorado, which took him a few pegs down in being in that stature.
Part of the Steph thing in this three-point revolution is that we have now simplified the NBA. All right, we're just going to shoot a bunch of threes.
Yeah.
My question to you, going back to that basketball intelligence piece, does the game require more basketball intelligence now, or does it require less than when you first started?
You can't ask me that, because I'm always side on basketball IQ.
Yeah.
Always. I think throughout the regular season, you can get away with a low IQ team if you're talented. You can get away with it in the first round and maybe get away with it in the second round. But when you get to the conference finals and you get to the finals, obviously the top 4 teams in the conference finals, they have players, unless a team just happened to hit a heater and they just get lucky. But the top 4 teams normally are going to be the teams with the best players, for the best coaches. And what's going to separate them is now the basketball IQ kicks in.
And that's where the analytical guys tend to fall. Guys like Daryl Morey, that system that they had running with the Houston Rockets with James Harden, CP3, nothing but layups and threes and barely any mid-range. Once you get to that top 4 seeding or just play against the teams in the playoffs that have the high basketball IQ, like the Golden State Warriors, you're going to lose out. You already phased out one part of the game, which is the mid-range, and you basically shrunk the floor in a playoff atmosphere in which the floor is already shrunken due to the referees tucking in their whistles. They don't call fouls as much, and every possession being important to the point where the pace is slowed down so much that the game is now a half-court game. And you can add on top of that the pressure the players are facing, because the playoffs do have very, very big key moments that can make and break certain players' careers. So a lot of the basketball analytics, particularly what Daryl Morey and the Houston Rockets were running, it does not work the higher up you go.
Because there's moments in the game that a coach cannot prepare you for, film can't prepare you for.
And fucking analytics could never prepare you for, or even could spit out. Once again, this is where the analytical heavy crowd tends to fall off. It makes for great regular season basketball. You can have a winning record, make a playoff appearance. But as far as winning a championship, when you automatically phasing out the mid-range before the game even starts, it makes no sense. You're going up against high IQ teams that the players from the 1 through 7th man on the bench, when they're out there on the floor, they're all in sync defensively.
The history of the game can't prepare you for,
Right.
where you have to have a basketball IQ to make adjustments right away. And if you don't have that level of mind frame or capacity, then a team like Denver, who has one of the greatest IQ guys that we've ever seen in Jokic, Golden State, Draymond, Steph, any one of my teams, if I played you in the finals, myself, and when I won it in 20, it was myself and Rondo on the floor. So I think that those things help. I believe that when Golden State beat Boston, it came down to IQ in the finals. Because Boston, to me, had the better talent.
And they definitely did. The fact that Stephen Curry won an NBA championship with Andrew Wiggins as his second best player and Otto Porter Jr. having to start in the final 3 games, it says a lot. It says a lot. And Stephen Curry, that championship definitely solidified his legacy. I mean, you can make a valid argument that he's definitely entered top 10 just through that championship alone. That's how much validity that championship brought him. Not only he secured his own NBA Finals MVP, he carried that team on his back, especially without Kevin Durant.
Boston had the better talent, but it came down to IQ. People say experience, IQ.
I made this comment the other day about Tatum. It feels like with him, the reads are quicker, making the right play, it's just quicker. He doesn't fight the game as much.
And that's normal for Jason Tatum. He's going through his progressions. He's only at the age of 25. I believe he turns 26 soon. But for the players in his generation, the Luka, the Ja Morants, the Zion Williams, Trae Young, and even to a degree Devin Booker, Jason Tatum is far ahead of his class when it comes to the on-court experience and just his experience overall. I believe he's been to 3 conference finals already and an NBA Finals appearance. And he's leading his generation by a mile, going up against players a little bit ahead of them in the age group around 30 with the guys like Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid.
I did the details thing for ESPN during that finals, and I did Clay was the first episode, Steph was the second episode, Tatum was the third. And so I had all these Tatum clips I got to go through and break down. You know, what I saw was on the isolations on the wing.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times would be in the slot,
Yep.
the high quadrant, right? And they've given him space. They would bring that low man over early. Sometimes it was Draymond, but not always.
Not always.
Sometimes it was Clay.
Yep.
And very rarely did he end up getting the Golden State Warriors into rotation.
Yeah.
Now, it feels like he's just making the play off the ball. Now, it did happen a couple times in that finals.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as quick,
Right.
and it was rare.
Yeah.
And he also settled too much from the mid-range, especially going one-on-one. And at times it looked like the moment was a little bit too big for him.
And obviously with their personnel, like it's different now with Porzingis, but I think that's part of like the growth. So
That's part of the
even
growth.
going back to like the question about can you teach basketball IQ, in some ways it's innate,
Right.
but in some ways, if you're studying it and doing it, you can see the growth in a player.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a great saying that says the best teacher in life is experience as well. And we look at Tate, I mean, he's 25 years old. He's 25 years old, and I believe he's been to the conference finals 4 times, been to obviously the NBA finals once. He's 25. I didn't win my first one until I was 28. I think Joker won his first one at 27. I think MJ was 28 as well.
Kobe without Shaq was around the same age.
Yeah, so
Steph was
I think.
So right here, you're seeing it's a normal progression. And once again, Tatum is far ahead of his class, far ahead of them, miles ahead of guys like Luka, Trae Young, Devin Booker, Zion, Ja Morant. And he's sort of leading his generation to taking the old guard from the older guys, the guys that are a little bit ahead of him, like Giannis, Embiid, and Jokic. And that's a hell of a feat to even lead your generation to make that attempt to take the rings from those guys. Because right now, all 3 of those players, they're the kings at the mountaintop.
You know, we have a lot of expectations on JT, but he's experienced a lot of winning in his career so far. And obviously, we everyone wants to see him get over the hump, but 4 conference finals in a finals appearance before the age of 26 that's elite. And like you just said, he's continued to grow, and they are in a position where they can make another title run. And like you said, personnel helps. Adam Porzingis and getting Drew for a bag of Lay's potato chips, that helps as well. that helps as well. But
those are pretty much insurance policies by the Boston Celtics. KP is going to give Tatum an option in the low post, especially as the game slows down in the playoffs. Him and Jaylen Brown don't have to dance around the perimeter nonstop and try to create their own shots. They can actually toss the ball down low to KP or have him stretch the floor even more. But at least they have a low post presence and someone who could score down there. But going back to earlier when I was talking about Tatum being the leader of his generation, going up against Giannis, Embiid, and Jokic, we also got to add Jimmy Butler to that list. Even though Jimmy Butler in age is a few years ahead of those guys, that is a low-key rival of Jason Tatum's. And there's a lot of intangibles that Jimmy Butler has that shines out during the playoffs. But since 2020, we've seen the Miami Heat and good old Jimmy Butler cause a lot of issues for Jason Tatum and the Boston Celtics.
JT is definitely When you go and you start scouting for Boston, he's the number one guy for sure.
So there you have it. You hear from the great prodigy himself, LeBron James, and this is only the beginning of him speaking on the nuances of the NBA and just basketball in general. But LeBron's basketball mind is definitely a thing that's not really talked about enough outside of his physical attributes. But I will touch base on this again when LeBron further elaborates on some of the amateur culture that's going on with the players before they make their way into the league. Because a lot of the habits and patterns and some of the culture that's happening down there is affecting the game, especially on a competitive level. But it's great to hear from the basketball prodigy himself, Mr. King James. And until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.